Good morning. The Hearing Board of the South Coast Air Quality Management District is in session. Today is Tuesday, November 19th, 2019. The time is just after 9:20 a.m. and we are meeting in the Hearing Board room in Diamond Bar. We have one matter on the calendar for today, and that is New-Indy, Ontario, LLC, case number 6162-1 for an interim variance. And who is representing New-Indy, Ontario today?
Greg Wolf with York Engineering.
Thank you, Mr. Wolf. And who is representing the executive officer today?
Teresa Barrera on behalf of the executive officer.
Thank you. First, I'm just going to ask anyone who wishes to testify in today's proceedings to please rise to be sworn in. Please raise your right hand. Do you promise to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God? Thank you. We also received, we might as well mark them right now. We also received 3 exhibits, 2, I believe, from petitioner. The first is a PowerPoint presentation that is entitled New-Indy, Ontario, LLC. And we'll mark that entire presentation as Exhibit 1. We also received a facility permit to operate, or sections from that. And we will mark that as exhibit number 2. And finally, we received proposed variance conditions for the interim variance, and we will mark that for the district as exhibit A, as in apple. Okay. Mr. Wolf, because you are requesting interim relief today, we are going to, as we do in all of our matters for emergency or interim variances, we're going to bifurcate the hearing to first determine whether we have good cause to proceed in absence of notice to the public. And I don't know, Mr. Wolf, are you familiar with what elements we need to look at for good cause?
I am.
Okay, and I won't go over that. But if we could try to the largest extent possible, just to limit whatever testimony and arguments we have to good cause first, and then we can incorporate all of that into the hearing on the merit should we get to that point. So with that, if you can give us an opening on good cause.
Thank you, Chair and Board, for hearing us this morning. My name is Greg Wolf. I'm a principal with York Engineering, and we're here presenting to you today for the case of an interim variance for New-Indy, Ontario. The facility is a paper mill that operates in Ontario, California, and we will start by introducing a little bit about the facility and its product, then going into the terms of the variance request and finding the timeline that led us to this place for a good cause.
Thank you. Ms. Barrera, any opening on good cause?
Yes, the district does not anticipate opposing a finding of good cause based on information set forth in the petition. It looks like the facility was in the process of commissioning 2 new turbines, and a problem arose based on the petition on November 10th, and they moved for relief within a couple days of that. We'll find out more information as the testimony proceeds, but again, based on the information in the petition, we don't anticipate opposing that finding.
Thank you very much. And Mr. Wolf, just to, having read through the petition and obviously having granted the ex parte, I know that probably you could touch on diligence in filing pretty quickly. And violation is clear, although you could touch on it. But I think mostly where you'd probably want to focus just for the good cause is that the violation could not reasonably have been avoided, and I would imagine you would present testimony regarding the design of the turbines or anticipated insufficient time to provide for public notice. And then I don't believe we have a date yet for the regular variance. Is that correct? Okay. They usually take about 45 days to set on the calendar. So if you could present any kind of impact, or what the impact is to the company, should we wait for relief until around 45 days, and then if we get to that point, we'll set a hearing date. And you may proceed.
Thank you. We would like to start with the good cause finding by giving a small introduction to the facility's background and how it got to this place. And for that, I would like to turn it over to Steve Delaney.
Good morning. My name's Steve Delaney, D-E-L-A-N-E-Y, and I am the Power and Utilities Manager at the facility. And we're going to start off with the presentation here, and we'll start with the second page there. So we are...
Are you set up to have that go through? Oh, you don't need to? Okay. And just, I'm sorry, before you begin, Mr.
Okay.
Delaney, you took the oath when I administered?
Yes, I
Okay,
did.
thank you. You may proceed.
Okay, so we are New-Indy, Ontario. We're a paper mill in Ontario, California. The facility's been there since 1985. It was under another name up to 2012 when we became New-Indy, Ontario. The paper mill basically uses 100% recycled materials to produce its products. We produce linerboard and medium for the containerboard marketplace. Basically, all our raw material, which is 100% recycled old corrugated containers, or cardboard, some people call it, is used in the process. So by using these materials, all the materials that you throw away in, or throw away in your blue containers at your houses or whatever, we usually end up at our facility. And we're able to make a sellable product out of it instead of sending it to a landfill. I mean, that's the biggest thing environmentally wise that we do. We keep all that old corrugated containers out of landfills, we recycle it and make a sellable product. New-Indy, again, like I said, purchased a mill in 2012. We employ 160 full-time staff. We are a 365, 24/7 operation. Okay, so we're always there. Back in 1985, when the facility was constructed, it was constructed as a CHP. It had its original GE Frame 6 gas turbine, which produced power and, of course, steam from the HSRG to power the facility, and also export power to the grid at that time, back in 1985. Next slide. So as far as products go, we make approximately 370,000 tons. We're on page 3 there, yeah, page 3. We make approximately 370,000 tons per year of sellable product. This product is basically shipped mostly in California and very, very close in the area here or surrounding us. Basically, our products are used to make boxes that are used in the marketplace. Approximately 30% of our product now goes to the Encore sheet plant, which is adjacent to us. Other customers that we sell to are International Paper, West Rock, fruit growers, and many, many small box plants and manufacturing facilities in the Southern California area. Typically, after those boxes are made, they are sent out to end users like Amazon, Walmart. A lot of the agricultural products that you get in the grocery stores come in these containers. So, I mean, of course, the valley is a big place for us where a lot of our packaging materials go, and keeps the products flowing to the marketplace. So that's a little bit of history about New-Indy, Ontario, and now we'll get into basically what we were doing out here at the facility. So starting in 2016, in response to the proposed NOx reclaim shave affecting New-Indy, we started an initial feasibility study in 2017 to replace our existing CHP equipment with new modern equipment. So we obtained a permit to construct from the South Coast on October 18, 2018. Was, major source permitting, reclaim, and Title V permitting. Our construction of the new project, we actually call Project Jewel. The construction started in November of 2018. Next slide. Basically, the objectives of Project Jewel was to reduce the mill emissions, and that was through BAT. We were replacing an existing single large turbine, which is approximately 33 megawatts per hour, and a steam unit with 2 smaller turbines and smaller steam units. We basically matched our equipment to the processes that we service. And then typically, as far as the makeup of the steam generation from the boiler to duct firing. So typically, the existing system was set up with an older unit with auxiliary boiler. The new system was designed to run basically the 2 new smaller turbines with the 2 new smaller HRSGs, and would supply the whole facility, keeping the existing auxiliary boiler as a backup unit. And at this point, as we go into slide number 6, I want to turn it over to Greg here.
Thank you, Steve. So as Steve indicated on slide 5, one of the primary objectives of the Jewel project was to shift steam generation from an older unit to new units that were able to have enhanced heat recovery systems, and thereby providing more steam to the plant while optimizing the electrical production for their own use.
Mr. Wolf,
Yes.
did you take the oath when I administered it today?
Yes, I did.
Oh, you did? Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you for indicating that. I didn't remember you standing up. So you're going to present together.
We're presenting together, and then we also have another member from the engineering company that was involved with the design to speak to where it is today.
Okay. I'd like if there's a way to sort of not have all 3 of you speaking before we can ask questions.
Sure.
But if you plan to present together with Mr. Delaney, then you may continue, and then we can ask questions from there, and then bring on your 3rd witness after.
I can speak to most of the rest of this presentation,
Okay.
and then we can go into the questioning.
Okay, that makes sense.
Okay, this equipment on slide 6 is described in the table. It was a fully conceived project which included power and steam generation. There are 3 affected pieces of equipment: a gas turbine train 1, which included a power generating unit as well as a heat recovery system with a steam generation unit. That's the heat recovery. 2 of those, as well as the existing boiler, which is a Sharon steam boiler. That's just the trade name of it, which is equipped with emission controls. So the connected to equipment is both NOx, CO, and VOC controls for the 2 new equipment, and the existing Sharon steam boiler has NOx controls. The next slide shows how it was intended to operate, with the 2 units up top providing steam and power, the gas turbine and duct burners, duct burner being an essential part of the heat recovery system. So to get the heat high enough to service the steam production, they have to add heat in by the way of a natural gas duct burner, because the exhaust gas from a turbine alone isn't sufficient. So by boosting, if you will, the heat through the duct, you're able to generate more steam, enough steam to service plant needs. So the way this was designed was to have those top pieces of equipment operating together, full time, all the time, except during maintenance. And that the bottom, being the boiler, would operate only as needed when one of the turbines was not in use. So their existing condition allows for the Sharon boiler to be operating full-time when one of the turbines is down. So it's exclusive. There's an 8-hour overlap just for transition. Other than that, they're exclusive in terms of the operating. And then from the mill, they serve the Encore and box plant that are part of the equipment or the services that are provided. The next slide gives a little bit more detail about where that goes. Steam is provided to New-Indy Mill primarily, and then Encore sheets.
Yes, Senator.
Discussion on exhibit 2, exhibit 1.
This is Exhibit 1, and they're taking, if you can just, it's the presentation. Oh, you might have marked them incorrectly. This one is Exhibit 1. Oh, yeah, you're in it. Okay. If you could just indicate every time you you go, since we're not watching it, you go to the next slide. If you just indicate the page number so that we can follow a little better. We are currently on page 9. They're up to page 9
9 and exhibit.
on exhibit number 1.
Thank you.
I think you have the exhibits together.
So I'm going to block this exhibit 1.
Oh, that is part of, I'm sorry. You have the last part of that page, that's the first page of what is part of the presentation. So just take it away from that and put it onto the presentation. And we're going, oh, and there's another piece. Somehow yours is a little messy.
I just picked up what was on my desk when I got it.
I think it's because they were attached somehow and it got pulled apart. Okay, so now those go to the back of the presentation, and then we're on page 9 of that presentation, which is and that presentation in its entirety is Exhibit 1, but we're on page 9.
And I apologize for not being more specific in my slide turning, Senator. One thing I will do, though, is I will ask for us all to go to slide 7, which I seem to have skipped, which is a nice picture. So this equipment was designed as a backed configuration, which brings natural gas into the plant, goes through a gas turbine, and produces electricity. Then the exhaust gas goes to that duct burner and is supplemented by natural gas and run through a heat recovery steam generator, or what's commonly called a HRSG. The HRSG then is used to create steam, as much steam as the heat will allow, the heat transfer, and then the exhaust continues to pass through the emission control system. This is important because the subject of this issue is that box called the HRSG. The rest of this equipment is fine. And now I will continue with slide 9. Slide 9 shows the designed heat and power service to the different entities that use this equipment, primarily the mill. The mill uses steam at the highest rate, approximately 310,000 pounds per hour, with with additional steam going out to the Encore sheet facility for a total of 330,000 pounds per hour, which is our request. Electrical power generation off of that unit or those services is approximately 32 megawatt hours. And as you may have seen in that flow diagram with the backed configuration, the gas turbine comes first in terms of heat. So it's essential that power generation is maximized because the exhaust from that power generation is what feeds the heat recovery steam generator. Continuing on to slide 10, the Project Jewel team is composed of the owner, New-Indy, Ontario, Sunt Construction, which is the engineering contractor, Vanderwell Engineers, engineer of record in the design firm, and then York Engineering, who I'm with. We filed for the AQMD permit applications and have been working with them on the compliance records. Next slide 11, Project Jewel is intended to have significant reductions. You can see that in the heat rate, electrical, and fuel use in all areas, this was going to be an optimized project to allow them to, from 1985 till now, go from now till the foreseeable future. This was designed as a permanent project for long term. Project Jewel emission reductions were significant, primarily as NOx, as mentioned by Steve earlier. This was intended to initially was conceived of as a NOx reclaim shave project, and the shave would have been a impetus to get the project going, but it also had collateral benefits of plant-wide efficiency. So we have emission reductions across the board for this project. Project startup and commissioning began with the north unit, which is the unit D67. And this is slide 13. Thank you very much. And then the first fire occurred a few weeks later in September of 2019 for the south unit, which is D75. Continuing on to now slide 14. Commissioning activities after first fire initiated, connecting to the load bank. And as the chair mentioned in our ex parte filing, there's a limitation in what the Edison grid can allow connection in terms of electrical throughput. And that's something that can be discussed at length if needed. But what that required was them to bring in load banks for the initial commissioning activities because they couldn't operate directly to the grid. The old unit at this point was still up and running. The old unit had much higher emissions. It's been running. So it was it continued to be the primary source of power as well as steam while it went through this initial commissioning activities. They went through a 100-hour service check, a syncing to the grid. Now, once they sync to the grid, what that does is because the grid only allows so much to come through, at that point they had to take down the old unit and allow the new units to serve as electrical production. So at that point, the old unit was offline, and the transition to power with one unit and the boiler resumed. So at that point, they were buying power, which was expensive. And then they went to initiate full duct burner firing. So at this point, as you look at that, remember that schematic with the backed configuration, when they went to full duct fire is when they were going to essentially make full steam production. And that's now what happened on slide 15 on Sunday, November 10th, when both of the duct burners were allowed to come up to full fire. They realized that the steam output was diminished from what was designed. And that was something that they had not anticipated. It impacted steam demand on the plant and to the paper machine and the sheet plant, which is Encore. Now going to slide 16. On Monday, so the next day, November 11th, New-Indy and their engineer Vanderwill brought in SISU Consulting, SISU. They're a specialization firm that is focused on heat recovery systems to analyze the issue. They looked at, one of the things they looked at was the way in which the heat recovery steam generator system was designed and actually constructed. One of the complicating factors is that there's a company that's involved with this called Innova. Innova was the heat recovery steam generator designer and supplier, and they are now a bankrupt company. So there are complicating issues with having to reconstruct their design. So research into the existing Innova design and supplemental documents were reviewed on Monday, the 11th. Continuing on slide 17, on Monday, the 11th, bless you, the SISU Consulting committed to modeling the Innova design, looking at the actual fabrication, so a comparative analysis, and what were some of the guarantees that were brought into with the design, the Innova design. And they looked at, and they were to develop options and viable paths forward for the plant. Moving now on to slide 18, Tuesday, the 12th. SISU Consulting provided a brief summary of their results to New-Indy and the larger design team that suggested that an issue was, that the issue may be related to how the tubes, which is essentially, if you think about a coil, that's how the heat passes through these tubes, and the exchange of heat to the tubes is how the steam is produced. So normally what would happen, or the design, was for staggered tubes, and we can speak more to that if you like, but that design element for the staggered tubes apparently would have increased some of the surface area for the exchange to be more efficient. Actual design, that should be construction, not design, appears to have been inline pitch. So there was insufficient exchange in terms of the way in which the heat can be recovered through the tubes. On that day, we filed the ex parte variance because we knew that at that moment there wasn't going to be a near-term compliance option available to them, and they would have to fire the boiler to be able to continue plant operation. Moving now to slide 19. We'll review some of the preliminary corrective actions under consideration. Possible fixes include one or more of the following: additional sections of tubes to increase the convection sections, modify the temperature of the catalysts so they can be higher temperature, add dilution air, or increase the baffling, which would essentially divert air around the tubes for greater residency and heat exchange. At that time, the SISU Consulting estimated that although they couldn't say for sure, they projected this to be a 6-month process. So hence the need for a longer-term period. Design review steps will include comparing the actual data to the design team, modeling actual data, modeling to determine best path forward, and the project team to determine which changes to implement. I'll just continue with slide 21 since we're almost done. There's a timeline there that just walks us through some of the preceding slides, bringing us to today, which is actually not shown. That's the 19th. But the 20th, SISU will present their findings in a more comprehensive manner and potential solutions. But those solutions have to be evaluated as part of the design review detailed in the previous slide. That will probably take at least 6 weeks to review that data and come up with the path forward. And that may involve additional equipment fabrication in the first quarter of 2020. Moving on to slide 22, it can't be overemphasized how critical heat and power is to the New-Indy operation. There is no way to really be viable as a company and buy electricity off the grid. The reason why almost all paper plants have combined heat and power systems is because electrical draw is very high and the steam production is essential. So by having that ability to do on-site power generation and heat recovery it's optimized for plant operation. To just have it be a boiler alone to provide steam would not be as cost effective. To continue on then on that same slide, on-site power generation is industry practice, and then Encore, which is the sheet plant next to them, uses it for starch cooking and the drying process. Much like a lot of things where, water tends to be, we're going to moisturizing. Actually, water and steam is a drying agent, so it removes the moisture from the paper products. So a little bit then finally on the ex parte variance request, we requested relief from permit condition E 193.3, which prohibits the boiler from operating in conjunction with both of the gas turbines. Estimated cost is at $14,000 per day for approximately 10 megawatts of Edison power. Excess emissions were based on a maximum boiler firing rate of 24 hours per day, so it's a worst case. And the boiler, just so that you know, that we're talking about now, this D41 has a NOx SIMS on it, so we have real data. Permitted use, what the facility could do today without being before you, could curtail steam. Curtail steam would mean that they would operate 2 turbines, no boiler, and they would be short on production. That cost is estimated at approximately $100,000 per day. The other option they could do with existing equipment as permitted is curtail electricity. By doing that, they would operate 1 turbine and the boiler, and that cost would be in the form of purchasing electricity from the grid as well as the sales electricity. That sale electricity or purchase electricity from the grid, as you'll notice, is $17,857, which is higher than the $14,000 presented in the variance petition, and that's because we had it's 11 megawatts. There was a little more time to look at what the need would be, so it's higher megawatt, and also we're going to the winter months, so we have a higher utility price. That's a little asterisk in that table. And finally, what they could do as a last resort, I think in everybody's case, would be to bring up the old turbine and the old steam generator off the turbine. The cost for that would be, in terms of pollution, NOx emissions from that unit was very high. It's on the order of 1,000 pounds a day at full operation. But it is available. It is on the plant, and it still could be brought up to operate. That's not our request. The next slide, slide 25. This will affect some other things, one of them being testing for SIMS certification. Condition D82.4, which is also part of the Exhibit 2 that was issued, or that was circulated, was not on the original variance petition, but is being asked for today. It requires that we operate a NOx SIMS, and that the SIMS be going through a SIM certification process within 90 days. That would bring us to tomorrow, which will not be met. And that's because one of the reasons why you do that SIM certification process is to test the SIMs at various loads, one of them being the highest load, which it currently cannot achieve because of the steam, the duct burner not being able to fire high enough. Moving on now to slide 26. And another aspect which will be affected by this is the initial performance source test. That's under permit condition D29.1, which is also included as a part of Exhibit 2 for various pollutants. The test is required to be performed at 5% of the maximum operating load, 5% of the minimum load, and an intermediate load. The protocol was submitted, and the schedule for that test to be performed is within 180 days of startup. And it is unlikely that we can foresee those being achievable at this time. So in summary, we're requesting compliance relief from 3 permit conditions. E 193.3 to allow the boiler to operate with the gas turbines. D 29.1 to allow source testing at maximum fire to be performed 180 days after startup. And relief from the RADA. The RADA is relative accuracy test audit testing to be performed within 180 days as well. So we seek compliance relief from those 3 conditions. And then that's slide 27. Slide 28, our final slide, is not something we feel like needs to be part of this variance, but we do want to acknowledge it because there's a commissioning period which is just concluded. Commissioning is when the equipment, comes into compliance with the backed limit. Condition C 1.7 gives a gas limit for that. We've just recently asked for a little additional gas to complete the commissioning process, but we feel like there will be also gas left over that's not used as part of these initial commissioning activities. The solution that we may come upon could require a final tuning of the units. And so we would request that the gas that has already been authorized be preserved for commissioning of the final solution.
Let me ask you one question. These last conditions that you're reading out from the permit, will they be implicated in the next 45 days before a regular variance can be heard?
The SIMS will be, the RADA.
If you could say it also by condition.
Yes. So looking now at slide 27, condition E 193.3 is our current
Right.
request. Condition D 29.1 will be met later after when a regular variance could be heard.
Okay, so then we will not consider that today.
Okay, and then condition D 82.4 though would be due tomorrow.
Okay. And then this newest one that you're saying C 1.7, that's why I was wondering if it will be implicated because you're not expecting an answer for 6 weeks, is that correct?
Correct. It will not be exercised until after the regular is heard.
And thank you for being so complete. I just wanted to make sure we sort of parse that out for our interim.
Thank you. And that concludes our presentation.
Thank you. That was really an excellent presentation. Very much appreciated. Ms. Pereira, do you have questions either for Mr. Wolf or for Mr. Delaney?
Yes, I have a couple. And I don't know, actually, they're more variance-related questions. I have no questions.
I too have some variance-related questions, which I'll hold. I had a question. Oh, I think it's answered. My question had been, why not continue to purchase power for the next 45 days? But you gave us a per-day expense on purchasing power, correct, in your page number 24. So that's $21,313 per day?
Per day,
Okay, if you continue to purchase the power that you need.
correct.
And that's if you operate with one term of the new turbines.
That's correct. On slide 24, that presents the cost.
Just one background question. So this whole project was in response to the reclaimed NOx shave. Is that still taking effect? When is that to take effect? Maybe Mr. Delaney wanted to, I don't know if Mr. Wolf or Mr. Delaney wanted, I thought you had put on whoever wanted to answer this one.
So, as you may know, Reclaim has had direction from the governing board to sunset. The genesis of the project's idea was prior to that being determined by the governing board. The old turbine is a big emitter. It contributes a significant percentage individually to the AQMP goal of reduction. So they were looking at that reduction as part of the Reclaim shave initially. However, even with the shave and the transition to barked, so this unit would be now subject to 1134, Rule 1134, which is the gas turbine rule. It doesn't have a compliance date until 2021, so they could continue operating the existing equipment for another year.
That's very helpful, thank you. And just for, I know at least maybe one new board member might not, just generally speaking, so Reclaim was the trading, or still is because it's sunsetting, the rule for trading NOx and other types of emissions, but here NOx is what is relevant, correct?
That is correct.
And the governing board has determined that instead they're going to go with command and control and sunset that trading program, is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, and now 1134 will be the direct control that, under which this equipment will fall.
That is their applicable rule, correct.
Thank you very much. Do you know, okay, you also presented to us, very helpful, that the original design was to have this staggered pitch design, but that the manufacturer, which is now out of business, is that correct? They're out of business?
To my understanding, it is.
Okay. Went instead with this inline pitch. Do you have any idea of why that decision was made?
I would have to defer to others that were involved more specifically with the design elements, if you'd like to have that answered now or during.
I will wait. I assume that's your third witness?
Yes.
Okay, I'll hold that question. Thank you very much. Anyone else have questions for Mr. Wolf or Mr. Delaney? Yes, Mr. Balagopalan.
Mr. Wolf, on the, this Encore, is it part of New-Indy?
I will defer to Mr. Delaney to answer that question.
Okay.
Encore is an adjacent sheet plant where the New-Indy, Ontario is part of New-Indy Container Board, and New-Indy Container Board has interest in that plant. They own parts of the plant now, I believe just the building right now, but they are a partner in that plant, yes.
So there are contractual obligations to supply steam to the plant?
Yes, we are under contract.
And the same thing with the inland paper mill, which
Yes,
is
the International
Paper,
Paper
yeah.
Box Plant next door, we're under contractual agreement to supply them power, yes.
and
Just
that's
power. Encore's
only.
power and steam, the box plant just power.
Okay, so if you can supply, then the Encore will have to shut down, is that?
That's correct. If we're not able to supply them steam, they will not be able to run.
Okay. What was the, you took over the business, New-Indy became the new owner in
Yeah, 2012.
what was the name of the previous corporation?
The previous company, up to February of 2012, it was owned by Inland Corporation, and then it was purchased by International Paper Corporation in February of 2012. And then the Department of Justice was involved with that purchase and recommended to International Paper to sell off 1 million tons of paper production per year due to monopoly issues. And at that point, New-Indy purchased the facility in July of 2012.
Okay, thank you. The issue with not having enough steam, is it, I know you haven't got the final report yet from CISU. Is it mainly due to just the design of the tubes, or is it insufficient water flow, or, I mean, are you getting this right steam temperature and pressure in those HRSG units?
Well, you know, there's still they're still looking at the design and see what happened. All we know at this point is running off the heat that is produced by the gas turbine itself is meeting the design. But when the duct burners and the rest of the boiler come into play, it's not meeting the design. We were only able to do about 120,000 pounds of steam versus the rated 165,000 pounds of steam.
And I think it indicated in the slides, the higher temperatures causing issues with the SCR units?
Yes, the catalysts that are currently installed cannot run over 800 degrees Fahrenheit. And if we do that, then we'll damage the catalyst.
And so you're proposing to replace them, or is that one of the options you're looking at?
That's one of the options we're looking at.
So right now, when they operate, you're not getting the reductions that we see, that was presented, is that correct?
No, we are getting the NOx reductions are happening, but it's just that we cannot push the duct burners above 800 degrees Fahrenheit and to protect the catalyst and protect the SCR reduction. And so the boilers themselves, instead of running at 165,000 pounds, we're only able to run them about 120,000 pounds.
As far as production?
Yes, correct.
Thank you.
If I may just add, my understanding is that the Encore contract that they have with Encore requires them to provide steam. So that is a non-negotiable term. They'd be in breach of their contract. So the deficit would be on their side. They don't have an option to not provide a steam if they are producing. Okay.
I did have a follow-up question, and maybe Mr. Wolf can answer that, and it might be more relevant on the variance hearing, but if that's the case, tell me. It's the restriction on not using the boiler when the two units are running. Is that a offsetting issue, why that?
Yes, it is.
Okay. And you're aware that under the rule, Governing Board 504, I believe E, you cannot grant a variance for more than 90 days if there's a Rec 13 offset issue?
Can you be more specific about what that means?
Rule 504 of the hearing board actually states rules from which variance is not allowed, and I can read that no variance or series of variances, including emergency and interim variance, shall be granted, which would allow emission to exceed an applicable Regulation 13 offset threshold for a period in excess of 90 days from the initial granting of a variance. So the hearing board would be limited, even in a regular variance by this, if it's due to an offset issue, in not granting more than 90 days.
Well, and I could allow the district engineer to continue to also weigh in on this, but as a replacement piece of equipment, the NOx reduction was no longer going to be the limiting factor. It was mostly just to be able to get the two units to operate with share and steam. Share and steam operations at full load would have been more than the offset, but because it wasn't expected as an operating scenario, it was an easier permitting path to just have the two turbines with their recovery generations going as full normal operating scenario with Sharon as a backup unit.
And we can get into that in the regular.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Board members, any other questions for these witnesses? Senator has a question.
On page 27, here, I guess, we have permitted conditions 29.1 and D 82.4. You're saying that you want the large source test and maximum fire to be performed at greater than 180 days after initial startup. How many days do you have in mind, and what would trigger compliance at that point in time?
D 29.1, we've ascertained, is not going to be in the ask for the interim variance because that would take place after the regular variance could be heard.
Is it the same thing with 82.4?
No. So you can ask that question with 82.4.
So 82.4 shall be test to be completed at greater than 90 days of startup. What's your estimate in terms of the test to be completed?
We'd like to test as soon as possible. However, the feeling is that in order to be able to test for the SIMs at the highest loads, we would have to wait until the solution is implemented so that the unit would be able to operate at high load. So it could be toward the end of the regular variance.
So that's open-ended.
Yes, sir.
And the determining factors are those you were explaining?
One more time?
Determining factor, determining conditions for which compliance, is that what you're now explaining?
Yes, we are.
Just say it again so I can understand it.
So we're trying to look for a solution to the heat recovery steam generator so we can put more gas combustion through the heat recovery steam generator. Until that can happen, it can't go up to a maximum firing rate. It'll stay lower because of the limitations of the heat recovery generation. If it were to go higher, it could damage the catalyst and it would no longer be effective.
The heat recovery generator is what you're trying to tweak.
Yes, if I may, can you go to slide, I believe it's 6? No, 7. Slide 7.
Looking at it,
It's the title is called Backed Configuration.
gotcha.
If you look in that diagram where it says steam coming off of the HRSG, you see the blue tube?
Oh, yes. Yes, I see it.
That's our issue, is that that box is not working right. So our goal is to fix that box so that its steam is 100% what it was designed for.
What technique are you using to tweak it?
That has to still be determined. It's going to be modeled,
You've got engineers working on it,
correct?
whatever. Like,
Any other questions for Mr. Wolf or Mr. Delaney?
Just a clarification, what is the production limit that you are doing? 167,000 linear feet? What was the limit to keep the temperature at 800 so it doesn't affect the catalyst?
Yeah, right now, not to affect the catalyst is about 120,000 pounds.
120,000? When you say pounds, steam?
Yes, pound of steam, yes.
And can you relate that to so many linear feet of board or?
Yeah, oh, yes, based on the calculations that we showed in slide, what was that, 20? It was the one with yeah, so based on what contaminant we use, we're talking 336 tons per day of product loss due to the inability to produce enough steam. That's on slide 24.
Getting there.
Yeah, so the top scenario is as far as the steam curtailment.
Right.
So, yeah, so if we just run the existing 2 new units without the auxiliary boiler, we lose 336 tons per day, which equates to about over $100,000 a day.
Right. Oh, no, my question is more, you're limiting your production or your steam production so you don't exceed the certain temperature, right?
That is correct, yes, that's correct. We're not burning as much gas as we can because we'll exceed the temperature entering the catalyst.
Right.
SCR catalyst.
And the reason, and maybe we'll get, is I was trying to see whether we can put that as a condition on the variance, as part of the variance condition, but we can get.
We'll get to
yeah,
that.
We'll get to that, sorry.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
make
That's the
sure to
reason for
hold,
my
make sure to
question,
hold
yeah.
that.
Yeah,
hold
yeah.
that.
Question, yeah.
Any other questions on good cause for Mr. Wolf or Mr. Delaney? Okay, thank you. Mr. Wolf, you had a third witness, and I know, for example, that witness would be able to answer the question of, I guess to the extent that he can, of why the design might have been changed, and if there's anything else you wish for him to present with regard to good cause, this will be the time.
I think he could answer the questions on the design and actual fabrication and construction equipment.
Okay, so if you could state your name, spell it, let us know what your title is, and just indicate that you did take the oath today.
Hi, I'm Jay Martin. I'm with Vanderweil Engineers. My name is spelled Jaymartin. I am a field project manager. I do commissioning on power plants pretty much all over the U.S. I've been here since July, been working on this project, and I guess for your question regarding the design of the boiler was designed by the boiler manufacturer, and what the reference to as far as the staggered tubes versus inline tubes. So the process of the gas traveling through the boiler has to get top efficiency out of the boiler. You want to impinge as much of that gas flow onto these tubes to absorb heat. The first section, there's two boiler sections in this boiler. There's a front boiler, there's boiler number 1, then there's your catalyst section, and there's boiler number 2. Boiler number 1, which is just where the duct burners are, that section of boilers, if you were to stand at the end and look through the tube, so there's two drums, there would be an upper drum and a lower drum. Top drum is your steam drum, the bottom drum is your mud drum. Those tubes are connected with what's called convection tubes. Those tubes, as the gas passes through them tubes, if they're not lined up, you'd have a lot more path for the gas to so that the absorption rate, you could absorb some of that heat out of that gas path. These particular tubes, they were supposed to be staggered, but for whatever reason, when they were manufactured, the manufacturer did not stagger them. They're in line. So if you look down through the tubes, you could see daylight through the tubes, where if they were staggered, you wouldn't be able to see that.
And so the question had been, it sounds like you don't know, and that's
We
okay
don't
to say you
know why
don't know
they did that.
why they did that.
Yeah, we have no idea why the design indicates that they were supposed to be staggered, but they're not staggered.
And that's not an easy fix, is that,
That would not be an easy fix.
okay.
Yes, that's correct.
I would like to add that, as mentioned in testimony, the Innova was the boiler designer and supplier, and that company is now bankrupt. So that's one of the complicating issues with remodeling their equipment.
And all you have is, rather than actually having a technical person or someone to talk to, you only have their designs and paperwork, is that correct?
Exactly.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much for that. Ms. Barrera, did you have any questions on that additional testimony?
No.
Senator does.
Right. I asked you about 82.4. We talked about 90 days, and you saying you had engineers working on this as we speak. And I just refer you to your good cause question. And you talked about the combined heat and power CHP system. You're looking for 330,000 pounds per hour that you need to operate the system, ideally. But then you go on to say that you refer again to HRSG, and you're saying that it's going to take, with the engineer, about 6 months. The 6 months is different, greater than the 90 days you talked about on page 27. So what is it?
That's correct. It's greater than 90 days.
That's why they're asking for a variance relief from that provision, because they will not be able to do it within 90
When the
days.
90 days is what the,
That's why they need relief.
that's what the permit says.
That's correct.
So, okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Yes, and Mr. Balagopalan, and then Ms. Verdugo Peralta.
Mr. Martin, so when they install the inline system, it's not unusual to have inline was staggered. I mean, they didn't purpose, I mean, because you have seen number of installation with inline tubes, right?
That's correct, yes.
and was staggered, but the rationale is that with the staggered, you get better heat transfer and so forth.
That's correct.
But those are also part of the type of insulation you see, the inline ones.
Yes, it's not unusual to see inline.
So, okay, so just because they used inline here, but you're still trying to figure out what else could be the issue?
That's correct. There's, you know, several things we're looking at, but, you know, to answer your question about inline, so if they were to absorb that much heat out of an inline design, then they would have maybe put more tubes in or put some baffles in or something like that to redirect some of the airflow, some of the gas, the hot gas path.
You're still getting the superheat temp,
We're getting the superheat temp, yes.
and it's about 425 or,
Yeah, actually, we're controlling the superheater temperature based on, it's actually higher, but that's anticipated anyway, and you know, you're always gonna get a little bit higher superheat temp, so we de-superheat just as we come off the boiler.
and the water flow is the same as,
Water flow is the same, everything's within, you know, 2 or 3% of the steam flow. So when you correct your feed water flow based on temperatures, you're right there.
okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Ms. Verdugo-Peralta, you had a question?
Thank you, Madam Chair. On page 16, you're referring to the fact that you hired Sant Vanderweel to investigate the HRSG shortfall, and they are possibly going to go back to the Innova designer, regardless of the fact that they're bankrupt, but through that insurance claim, I'm understanding that. My question is, was this failure discovered before or after when Innova went out of business?
It was discovered after.
After. How much after?
We didn't discover this problem until November 10th,
And when did they go out of business?
last April.
It was early in the year. I say January sometime was when it was.
So how is it then feasible that Sant Vanderweel is going to find anybody to be able to go back to that design? I can understand on paper, but are you going to have to ask questions of that designer to be able to have that as an option?
So one of the key, or the employees that was a key designer that worked for Innova, we know who that person is, and we've been in contact with him. So we've been having discussions with him, so we're using some of his knowledge, because he was running their engineering department, so we're getting some valuable information from him as well. So that's kind of one of in the investigating process, that's gotten us to that point.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions on good cause? Senator?
Right, have you looked at the proposed variance conditions?
We're going to wait on that. We're still
I
in
mean,
good
just-
cause.
It's right on here.
We're still in good cause. But we're not up to that yet. We're not up to the actual variance yet. We're just still in good cause as to whether or not we can proceed for it. Once we determine whether we have good cause,
I
we will go to that.
understand. But that system is significant. I'll deal with it later.
Yeah, we will definitely have time for that. Any other questions, though, on good cause? And then we could end this portion. Did you have any other witnesses that you wish to present on good cause?
None, thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Pereira, did you have any witnesses you wish to present on good cause?
No, I don't.
Okay, thank you. Then, Mr. Wolf, did you want to give any kind of closing summary or statement on good cause, or do you want to just rest?
Other than just quickly saying that the facility has been operating in very good faith and trying to come to a solution as quickly as possible. As soon as it was identified as being an issue that they could not cover quickly, they filed the ex parte, which we are much appreciated for the board granting. We just would like to be able to continue our efforts in looking for solutions to this problem. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ms. Barrera, any closing on good cause?
Yes, based on the testimony presented today, the district would not oppose a finding of good cause in this case.
Thank you. Board members, Mr. Balagopalan, you wish to begin?
Yeah, I think we can find good cause because once they figured out that they were not getting the steam on November 10th, I believe, then they applied very quickly for the ex parte, and which was granted on November 13th, I believe. Let me check that.
They filed on the 12th. I
The
don't
12th, and
don't
it was
recall.
granted on November 13th. So they did file, expeditiously when they've realized that they have an issue and they're going to be violating a condition, not so much as a visible emission, a permit condition that did not allow the boiler to be operated when both the units are in operation. And since they've taken the old CHP unit out of service, and so I mean, they could go back, but I think the evidence also shows that from the data presented, there's more emissions from the old unit versus the new unit. So there's like 1,000 pounds a day less. That's a significant number. So there is an adverse impact air quality there. And I think it could not have been avoided because they didn't anticipate this. They were going forward with their testing when they realized the steam production was not up to par. And I believe they exercised diligence in filing for the petition.
I agree. I agree with everything you said and with the finding of good cause. Certainly, it's imminent that there will be a violation of their condition, their permit to operate D82.4, since that RADA test is due tomorrow, and that's certainly imminent. The other violation, which is the major violation of 193.3, and the running of the old boiler in conjunction with the new turbines. I can't say it's imminent, but I think that page number 24 of Exhibit 1 is an excellent exhibit, which shows the many different options that they could do in lieu of asking for an interim variance today. And so jumping down to our finding number 4, which you touched on, Mr. Balagopalan, denial of the interim variance would result in, I think that's shown here. So we could deny a hearing or end an interim variance. However, the only options they have are, number 1, to just reduce the steam, which would be about $100,000 a day. So that would be an unreasonable or unavoidable adverse impact to petitioner. Or curtailing electricity, not running one of the turbines, which they're allowed to do under their permit, so they would not need a variance. But then they'd have to purchase $21,000 a day, which would be unreasonable. Or, as you mentioned, the running of the old turbine. They could do that without asking for an interim variance relief today. But we'd have 1,000 pounds per day of NOx emissions excess. And so that turbine is remaining off. So with that and the fact that I don't believe it could have been anticipated in sufficient time, they didn't run full blast or to full capacity until the 10th, which is when they found out that even though it was designed a certain way, it's not producing the steam that it was designed to produce. So I think we can make all the findings. Any other thoughts? Ms. Verdugo-Peralta.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I also am looking at the number 4, which has to do with the emission amount that would be probable in this case. And the fact that you have recognized that and have brought that back to the hearing board, I truly appreciate you doing that, as well as the expeditious manner in which all of this was taken upon and all of the preparation of this. This is a very good PowerPoint to give us a good explanation and a good understanding of what the situation truly is. And based on that, I also agree that there is good cause.
Any other thoughts? I agree also. Thank you, Senator. Did you want to talk it to the microphone, or just you agree?
I just said I agree also in order to have the system operate where you effectively achieve 330,000 pounds per hour for steam, which is not achievable at this point in time, given that the HRSG is not achieving the goal that it was designed to achieve, and it can require some tweaking. When they discovered that they were not there yet, they applied for variance in a timely fashion. Yes, they would lose more money if they went to Edison to buy some power. That's not cost effective, but they're going to reduce the emission by supplementing it with, I think, a burner, which would be okay. They're asking for additional time to be in compliance, and they need more than the 90 days prescribed in the permit. And they indicate that they have engineers working on the system, which may exceed 6 months. But once they determine what the problem is, they're reporting that to the district in a timely fashion. So the district is aware of the action that they're taking in order to be in compliance, identify the problem, fix the problem, and then therefore be in compliance. That's all specified in the petition and also in the documents that they provided. So I think it's a good cause.
Thank you, Senator. And I also just wanted to repeat, not only thank you for the very good documents, which we'll delve into, it seems, on the next phase, but also bringing the correct witnesses with you. We much appreciate that. Mr. Balagopalan, did you want to make a motion? I'm sorry? Well, I don't know that we need the presentation in evidence, but we could put the, before we make the motion, exhibit number 2. Well, we could. Do you want either or both to be in evidence?
The conditions for sure should be in evidence. The presentation is optional.
I think we could do that because it has a lot of information. Any objection, Ms. Barrera?
No.
Okay, exhibits 1 and 2 are in evidence. And with that, Mr. Balagopalan wishes to make a motion.
Okay, yeah, in the matter of New-Indy, Ontario case number 6162-1 for the facility located at 5100 Hurupa Street in Ontario, I move that I think we can find sufficient good cause to proceed with the interim variance.
Second.
And Ms. Verdugo-Peralta seconds that motion. Any other discussion on that motion? Thank you. Seeing none. Senator, how do you vote? Dr. Bernstein, how do you vote?
Aye.
I vote yes. Ms. Verdugo-Peralta, you vote?
Aye.
And Mr. Balagopalan?
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0. So we'll take a break before we proceed, and when we come back, we'll incorporate all of that evidence and testimony and move on to the 6 findings for interim variance, as well as the setting of the regular variance hearing. So let's take 15 minutes, and we'll be back at 10:50, 5-0. We're off the record. Okay, we're gonna get back on the record here for the second part of our hearing. And before we begin, I just want to make sure that there's no objection from either side to incorporating both the testimony and evidence that was received in the good cause portion of the hearing. So, Mr. Wolf, any objection to that?
No objection.
Ms. Barrera, any objection?
No objection.
Okay, so we are incorporating the testimony and evidence that we received, including Exhibits 1 and 2, which are in evidence. I'm going to take a second. It seems that we've got two members, one on the phone and one. Okay, so we are incorporating the testimony and evidence from the first part of the hearing. Okay, and, I wanted to discuss the date, before we forget, for the regular variance hearing. I was thinking the 7th of January, because 45 days gets us into the very end of December, and also we are awaiting that essentially 6-week report. And I think it would be best to have that report on what might be wrong before we proceed with the regular. Does that work? And
I'm going to be out on a leave, and we'll be returning on the 7th.
Oh,
So
okay.
that date, if you want to go on that day, I could try to get somebody else to do the hearing. Otherwise, I would prefer the following week.
the following week.
Yeah, just because that will be my first week back in the office.
Okay, let's preliminarily say the following week, which is, must be the 14th.
14th, yeah.
14th? Okay, is that? Is that acceptable, Mr. Wolf? Will you all be available?
That's acceptable.
Okay, so let's mark it as that, unless there's some reason that during this part of the hearing, we feel we can't wait that long, but I don't anticipate that. So the regular variance then will be set preliminarily for January 14th, 2020. 2020, how exciting. Okay, and with that, I'm going to turn, Mr. Wolf, if you'd like to make any opening statement on the 6 findings we need to make for variance. Many of them are obviously similar or the same as what we've already found for good cause, but there are additional findings, and in particular, findings, the finding having to do with weighing excess emissions, which we haven't heard too much about, against any harm.
Thank you. So the petitioner has explained during the good cause phase how the facility's expectation for equipment to be operated and meet the plant needs was part of the original design. This system was looked at as a very big emission reduction project. It was going to serve the function of being able to be both more efficient in power and heat generation for the plant, at the same time reducing emissions. If I may call your attention to slide 12 of Exhibit 1. Each one of our primary pollutants has a significant reduction as a result of the project. Excess emissions from Sharon's steam boiler are not greater than the reduction by the project. And with that, I will leave it. Thank you.
And Ms. Pereira, do you have any, opening statement on the interim variance?
Yes, I suspect that the facility, based on what we've seen so far, is going to be able to provide sufficient evidence to make the findings for the interim variance, and I anticipate that I will not be opposing issuance of that variance. We have provided the hearing board with some proposed conditions. I think part of, this next portion of the hearing, part of the focus may need to be on just, are there some additional conditions? And because there will be a hearing in January, it may be that just making reports is sufficient at this time. On the other hand, if they think they can have their design or their sort of problem analysis complete by the end of the year, it may be that we want to put some dates in or deadlines in. I'm just not sure if this hearing is the appropriate time to do that. It may be better suited for the next hearing. The other issue I want to just raise is with respect to Rule 504 and that as a potential issue. For today's hearing, and up until the time of the regular variance hearing, I don't think we'll need to address that issue. In talking with staff, it sounds like there may be, the excess emissions that are being proposed are based on maximum usage. If you look at actual usage of the boiler in prior years, it was substantially below that. So that I don't believe there is an offset issue that's going to come into play on this, so that there would be a limitation caused by Rule 504. But there's a lot of math that needs to be done just to confirm that. And so I would also propose that issue just be kicked to the next regular variance hearing. It's not in play today.
I think that's correct. However, I think it's good that it was raised so that those calculations can be done and all the necessary thinking can be had before the next hearing. Thank you. Okay, so then, Mr. Wolf, I'm going to turn it to you, whether you want to present evidence yourself or one of your other witnesses that we need, in particular, to more fully explain, perhaps, that page number 12 that you had brought up, because you said it quickly, so I'm not sure and also to go over the variance conditions and whether or not you are in agreement with them.
Thank you. The table speaks largely for itself. I didn't actually prepare much material other than that. It is, we'll be happy to explain further the equipment layout, but the emission reductions were all part of the permit to construct as evaluated by the engineer, the South Coast engineer. We have reviewed Exhibit A, which is the proposed variance conditions the district has offered, and they look acceptable to the petitioner.
Okay, then, unless there's anything else you wish to present, then I will turn it over to Ms. Barrera for questions.
Yes, and I don't know who the most appropriate witness is. I have some questions just generally about when the boiler would need to be used and sort of the configuration or the different possibilities for using the different equipment. So who would that be? Okay, Mr. Delaney.
Yeah, typically, in the past, the way the system was set up is the existing older unit would run, and then the Sharon steam boiler was the auxiliary boiler. In other words, the turbine would run full out, get all the steam we can from that existing HRSG, and then the auxiliary boiler would make up the difference of steam demand that we needed. So in the interim here with the variance, we're going to be basically doing the same thing. We're going to run to 2 new units and get as much steam as we can out of those units, and then make up the extra steam that we need to meet the process demands from the auxiliary boiler. Now, that's what we're doing here. We're just basically moving from one older turbine that polluted a large amount of material to 2 units that are BAT and doing basically the same thing.
Okay, and when would there are times when only 1 turbine will be running in the boiler versus 2 turbines in the boiler? What defines when that different equipment is used?
So typically for us, under normal operations, both turbines will be running because we need the megawatts off them, so we don't have to purchase power. And again, the D41 or the Sharon steam boiler will be run as needed as far as the extra steam that is needed to run the process.
And are the power requirements or the steam requirements, do those vary from day to day?
Normally with the power requirements, typically we run the units, the turbines are usually ran at what we call base load. So we'll get as much power from those units as we can. And then that power is then distributed between the mill, Encore, the box plant, and whatever's left over goes to the SCE grid. And that will vary throughout the day depending on temperature and things like that. Steam demand will vary depending on what products we run. There's certain products that we run where we don't use as much steam, and there's other products where we need full capacity.
Okay. And are the steam requirements of Encore, are those consistent on a daily basis?
No, typically, they run very many grades of paper and sheets down there. They'll swing anywhere from 3,000 to 4,000 pounds per hour, all the way up to 20,000 pounds per hour in a split minute. I mean, it's kind of like they're almost running a car with a gas pedal. They speed up and slow down that equipment, and they have to have the steam there to do it.
Okay. Do you know, or how far in advance do you know what your power usage requirements are and your steam usage requirements are?
It's typically, as we run both of the processes, it varies dramatically and very quickly. So as far as time in advance, we kind of have a theory what we're going to be doing, but we won't really know until as the machines run, they speed up, slow down, and do the things that they do. So basically, the standby capacity is very important.
Okay. And how do you find out what Encore's needs are?
The only way we able to manage what Encore does is we have a Corsair meter that supplies them steam, and we have to have 20,000 pounds available to them at all times. Now, they don't use it all the time, but they have to have it, so when they push the gas pedal, it's there for them.
Okay. And there is a contract with Encore that says you have to have that amount available to it on a daily basis?
There's a contract with Encore that we have to supply them the steam that they needed to the event that it affects our process. We have to guarantee them steam before us.
Okay. And with respect to International Paper, you provide them with power but no steam, is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. And is there a contract that requires you to provide them with power?
Yes, we're under contract to supply them power when they want to purchase it from us.
Okay. When I look at page 9 of the PowerPoint, it also talks about the power that is provided back to the utility grid.
Yes, that's correct.
Are you selling that power back to Edison?
Yes, we do sell that power back to Edison per our PPA agreement.
Now, is that a requirement that you provide that power, or is that just sort of you've generated that much and that's the leftover power for the day, or how does that work?
Yeah, typically the way our agreement with Edison is it's as available. So whatever available power we have, we put on the grid for them to use in their system. So, and also too, the reason we do that is you want to run the turbines in base load because you're getting that heat from making power. So the way we look at it in our business is that's free heat that we're getting because we're making heat because we're making power, and that's free for us basically because we're getting the reward back for the power that we produced, and the steam is free. So that makes the CHP process the most efficient process in the world today.
Mm-hmm. Now, is there, what I'm trying to also figure out is if there is room for curtailment in the sense that, I mean, when you're seeking a variance and you're seeking relief and permission to operate in violation, you know, the hearing board and the district's not inclined to provide that permission if the goal is just simply to obtain profit as opposed to, is this something that you could cut back on, or is this, that's why I'm trying to understand it better. Is it just like, this is a residual because of what you needed that day, or is this something that you specifically go out and intend to generate?
Well, as far as power goes, I mean, typically that's the most efficient way to run the process. So that's kind of how we manage it that way. And then as far as products and our customers, I mean, we run 365, 24/7 a day. All our product is needed in the area. And especially the Encore facility uses 130-inch rolls of our product, which are very, very specialized. They're only one of 2 corrugators in the country that are 130 inches wide, and it's very difficult for them to find product elsewhere to run. So it's very important to us to maintain our run schedules and make sure our customers are getting the needed paper that they have to make boxes for the rest of the businesses that they support.
With respect to emissions or excess emissions and quantifying it, it's my understanding that you'll be relying upon the SEMS to quantify the emissions?
Yes, yes, the current sheriff's team boiler has a certified SIMS on it, and that's typically what we'll be monitoring is how often that runs and how many pounds per hour it's emitting.
Okay, and it is a certified SEMS?
Yes, it's a certified SIMS.
Okay, and that SEMS, just so the board is clear, is different from the SEMS or the other SEMS that you're seeking relief from the RADA testing requirement on, is that correct?
That's correct. The sheriff's team unit has its own SIMS, and both units, the north unit and the south unit of the new turbines, have their own individual SIMS also. So there's 3 SIMS involved here.
Okay. I also have some questions regarding sort of the problem analysis that's going to go on. Are you the best witness for that?
I can get through, but Mr. Martin here can answer also.
Okay. In the timeline, I guess that's page 21, or it's forecast that, first of all, that tomorrow CSU is going to present their findings and potential solution. Is that meeting still expected to take place? And do you believe that they're going to actually have the problem, I guess, confirmed by tomorrow?
Well, I think that's what is scheduled currently right now, and hopefully they'll maintain that. I mean, we have been talking with them already as they're going through the data, answering their questions. So at this point, we're assuming that they will be ready to give us something tomorrow.
Okay. And part of that investigation that has been occurring has been the contact with the designer, I guess, at Innova?
Yeah, we were told that they have tried to make contact, actually made a few calls that got through, but then as time has went on lately here, he has not been answering his phone calls. So
Okay.
we are having some difficulties right now with the Innova personnel,
Okay.
ex-Innova personnel.
Okay, so yeah, there are different types of bankruptcies that occur. Do you know whether they are in the type of bankruptcy where they have actually closed their doors?
Yes, they have closed their doors.
Okay.
I mean, we got into the issue where, they stopped payment to all their support vendors, and we've had a lot of issues with that happening to keep the project going.
Do you know if they're going to be seeking to reopen or continue operating?
I don't know. I wouldn't know that.
And going back to the schedule, will the design review and the engineering determinations are proposed to be concluded by the end of the year? How firm is that date?
Based on my experience, that should be ample time to get a solution agreeable to the group. Then, the fabrication and the certifications and all that stuff, depending on what we're going to do, will determine that time frame. Because if we have to certify tubes and things like that, we have to go through a lot of testing and protocol to get that done. Okay. And then also we're looking at downtime on the units to install that equipment also.
Okay. Can you tell us, why we should think that they are operating sort of as quickly as possible, you know, especially with the holidays coming up. I mean, are people going to be taking breaks, or is this something why should we believe that this is something really important to both your facility and that design company here?
I think the big thing is the team that is working on this project is very concerned about the issue we're in now, and we're all trying to make sure these things happen as quickly as possible. I mean, even to the point that you saw that, so the testing was done on a Sunday, shows that we're working 24/7 on this project, trying to get it up and running, and it really means something to us. Personally, I haven't had a day off in a month because we're trying to get this thing up and running. So, and a lot of other people have been doing the same thing. So it's really important to us.
Okay. Can you give us an estimate of what this project has cost the company, Project Jewel?
Yeah, currently it was designed for $50 million. With all these delays and added costs and things that we've run into, just getting to the point we are today, it could exceed that.
Okay. And are these delays costing the company additional funds?
Oh, yeah.
I have no further questions.
Can you just expand on that, that the delay is costing the company in what ways?
Well, typically for us, if the projects went as smoothly as possible, we would be experiencing a gas savings at this point. So both the new turbines came up and running with the duct burners the way they were designed. We'd be saving gas, and we'd be running more efficiently to produce steam. And not only will our cost of environmental drop because of the need for reclaim credits, because we do have to purchase reclaim credits on the open market currently to run. Also, our GHG credits would also come down also, which are a lot more expensive, as you know, than RTCs. So that's the big savings on this project was in the environmental area.
And actually, I don't think the board, I know I'm not familiar. So the greenhouse gas emission, those are more expensive than reclaim?
Yeah, my experience currently right now for an RTC credit, which is the AQMD reclaim program, they go anywhere from $2 to $3 a pound, where the CO2 credits or a CCA, as in the greenhouse gas plant from the state of California, currently right now are going for over $17 a ton.
Thank you. And also, are you incurring significant expense with having consultants hired to work out this issue?
Yes, definitely the overruns are up. Consultants are not cheap. I mean, they definitely are very costly. And as we go longer and longer in the project and require more and more consultants, of course, the cost is naturally going to go up.
Thank you. Well, I had a question, just trying to understand page 12 of Exhibit 1, the Project Jewel emission reduction. I just want to understand the basic inputs of this. So when you say pre-modification potential in terms of NOx, VOC, and PM, that is using the old turbine and the old boiler. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Oh, thank you. Okay, that was Mr. Wolf. And then the post-modification potential, that is the two new turbines, but not the boiler or the old turbine. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. So this is what you expect to achieve, and what you're saying is what's left, and this is just, that's pounds per year. Okay. But a 94.3%, a 95%, and a almost 50% on PM10. But the majority of those reductions comes from the old turbine being taken out of operation. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. So you're still going to realize the majority of those reductions.
That's right. The proposed operating scenario under the petition is still within these reductions. The Sharon steam operation will not bring these numbers to above the pre-project potential. And with actual emissions via SIMS, likely they'll be substantially closer to what the projected potential is, the
Okay.
post-project.
So they are likely to be closer to what you have here as the post-modification potential, substantially closer to those numbers than what you have here as the pre-modification potential.
Substantially closer, correct.
Okay. And then on page 5 of the petition, where you have for NOx, SOx, VOC, CO, and PM, that is your estimate of excess emissions from continuing to run the boiler and the 2 turbines, but that is if you were running it 24 hours per day, maxing.
That's just
The
for
boiler?
the turbine, or excuse me, just for the boiler operation. So that is the only, we're estimating excess emission to be the boiler's operation,
Okay, and that is if you were running the boiler max,
correct? So-
24 hours a day.
Right, the highest steam value, the highest heat rate, all the time.
Okay, and you anticipate that it will be significantly less than the numbers we see here?
Significantly less,
Okay.
correct?
And then I had one other question, and that is, the SEMS will be running, but on the boiler, but that only reads NOx emissions, or does that read other emissions?
Only NOx emissions.
Okay, so then condition number 3 regarding monitoring fuel usage and recording excess emissions, that's for all other pollutants, not NOx?
Correct.
Okay. Do we need to specify that, since I would assume excess emissions for NOx will be based on not this fuel usage, but instead on the certified SEMS?
That clarification is helpful.
Okay. Okay, those are my questions, thank you. Other questions? Ms. Verdugo-Peralta?
Thank you, Madam Chair. In reference to the questioning of the possibility of you making any profit by selling power back to the grid, can you verify that what you utilize, let's say, per kilowatt hour is at a higher rate than what you sell it back to the grid for? Are you aware of that?
You know, typically, as far as the amount of revenue we generate from making a MEG and put it on the grid on SCE is not a large amount of money. It's typically at sometimes during the day, the way SE pays for their power, we're either breaking even or losing money most of the time.
Well,
So,
you
is that
actually
what you're
have
looking-
two different rates. You're going to have your regular electrical rate, then you're going to have a demand rate, right? So the amount that you pay for usage of electricity per kilowatt hour, penny per penny, dollar for dollar, is far more than what you sell back into the grid. That's what I'm trying to verify with you, which is the way it's supposed to go.
Well, typically, if we sell a megawatt to the grid versus we have to buy a megawatt for grid, there's usually 3 times the cost to buy a megawatt than it is to sell one.
Right.
So the SCE does has the upper hand on us on that.
I just wanted to verify
Yeah,
that.
yeah, they do.
Thank you.
Could I just interject too, from a
Can you just
standpoint of-
I'm sorry, for the record, because we also keep an audio record, just your name.
Yeah, Jay Martin with Vanderwild speaking. So just to kind of piggyback on what Steve Mr. Delaney is trying to explain too, in order for the plant to make the proper amount of steam, that megawatt output is needed as well, because the unit has to make the base load unfired is a certain rate. It's like 65,000 pounds per hour. So if we cut back the megawatts, they're losing that steam production, which is gonna have to be made up somewhere else, which would be Sharon. Now that unit would have to pick up some of that load that we're losing if we're not making the megawatts. So I just wanted to kind of clarify that for them to make the steam that they need those units running at full base load, whatever that base load is. So that's pretty much, each one of those units unfired are making 65,000 pounds an hour. Then when you fire the duct burners up, you're making up that difference, up to the point where we can't make any more steam because we're limited by the amount of heat we can put in the boiler at this time. Does that kind of help out a little bit?
Yes, but I was trying to get much more to the fact of the question of the district's attorney, that there was not a possibility that you would ever be making a profit off of selling back into the grid.
Yeah, I
Thank
can't
you.
speak to, but, thank you.
Mr. Balagopalan.
Mr. Delaney, so I'm trying to understand the production with and without the boiler, you know. So the baseline, if there was no issues with the boiler, you would have been just running the two combined heat and power units, the turbines, without the ancillary boiler being utilized at all, right?
I mean, there could be times due to mechanical problems or anything like that where the combined steam that is needed to supply Encore and the papermaking facility would be below that, but typically under normal running conditions, the way things are producing now, the Sharon steam boiler would be on at a rate about 20,000 pounds an hour minimum, because you got to keep it up at its minimum range. It can't drift off down to nothing, and you have to keep it at a minimum, which is about 20,000 pounds. So then, as the process pulls more and more steam, as they speed up and slow down, then the auxiliary boiler will kind of move up and down with the process.
Because you're aware that you have a limit on there's a condition on your permit that does not allow you to run the auxiliary boiler when both the two turbines are running, only when one is taken off.
Yeah, yes, that's the condition.
That's the
yes.
condition,
But,
okay.
currently today, been running to the variance, so yes.
And
Yeah.
you're seeking the variance so you can run all three.
Yes.
But a limited rate for the boiler to make up the additional steam you need.
Yeah, the way the variance was written, we're controlling the 3 units, and we will not go over 330,000 pounds of steam produced. So we're monitoring that to make sure that that doesn't happen.
So so thank you for clarifying that. So the 330 pounds per hour, and let's take off the 20,000 because that's, that's a given. You're contractual, and that's the first thing you have to do is to provide that. So you're looking at 310 for your facility, and that's with, that would have been the case without the boiler, with just the combined heat and power units.
Yeah, if we run under existing conditions with the old turbine and the auxiliary boiler, it was the same contract. We had to make sure they got 20, and we had 310 available for the papermaking process.
Right, so you're basically asking for the same level that you had designed for, basically under the variance.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, but earlier you said that due to the issues with the duct burner and the heat, and you are sort of throttled down the production of steam because you don't want to raise the temperature going to the SCR?
Yeah, typically the boiler limits, with especially the temperature to the catalyst, will only let the duct burners open up so much, and that way, that's why it's not getting to the point where it's producing 165,000 pounds.
And so, 165,000 each, so that'll be the.
Yeah. So currently, the way it is, the requirements of the boiler and the controls on the new boilers are, if the catalyst temperature gets to a certain point, it tells the duct burners to quit putting fuel in.
And I'm looking whether we should put that as a permit condition, as a condition of the variance. And if there's some, what is practical as a condition, so you don't exceed the temperature of the catalyst and,
I mean, we're not going to exceed it because it's a control function, and it will destroy the catalyst if we run it any hotter than 800 degrees Fahrenheit.
And so then, is there some kind of feedback mechanism that throttles down the duct burners and other burners that are producing the steam? How does that work as far as the feedback mechanism, the loop?
I'm going to have Mr. Martin answer that question.
So in the tuning process, we have, we're able to set it up so that we're monitoring the inlet of the catalyst. So at all times, we're monitoring the inlet of the catalyst, and the firing rate of the burner, even if it calls for 100%, the valve will continue to, you'll see the firing rate, whatever the firing rate is, but the valve internally now, we're looking at that catalyst temperature, and when we approach the 800-degree mark, at 793 degrees, we start backing down the duct burners.
And
So
that's automatically done, I mean,
All automatically done.
done.
So it's in the programming. So this is, that's how we're gonna, in all of these systems that we set up and commission and we, we put into service, that's how we ensure that the catalyst never sees a temperature, never exceeds the temperature of what the stated, design value of that catalyst is. So most catalysts, if you exceed the 800-degree range, if it's an 800-degree catalyst, you're going to diminish the properties of the internal properties of that catalyst, depending upon how high the temperature gets. But over a period of time, if you continuously hit it with 825 degrees or whatever, you're degrading that catalyst over a period of time. Up to a certain point where you can get, if you go to a certain temperature range, you can damage the catalyst in as little as 4 hours. It would be no good. So you have to be very cognizant of that.
And that's something you would have done regardless of this.
That's correct.
Because you don't want to exceed the inlet temperature.
That's correct. So even at the onset, before we discovered that on November 10th that we couldn't get the full load, we had always had that system in place. We just never got to that point. But, we knew that, we kind of suspected that we could have an issue, but we didn't know that we had the issue till we actually, was able to start playing with the duct burners and get them up to full power.
So you will have to throttle down on the duct furnace side, I mean, on the duct furnace, the duct burners, basically. So you still need 310 at the facility.
Correct.
So, but then you have to throttle because of the problems you're having there on the two units. The two units, I don't know how much you have to throttle. So you're making up from the boiler, the rest? Is that how you're balancing it?
Yeah, so whatever deficiency currently that we have, the Sharon steam boiler will make up that deficiency. And as Steve stated, you just can't shut the burner, you can't shut Sharon off. It has to sit there and produce some amount of steam, to be available.
And so in some cases, then, the boiler will operate very close to the maximum, maybe not completely 100, it won't be just 25% of your needs, but it could go higher than, or whatever.
Yeah, so whatever, if they're making, let's say I'm making, I'll just throw out a number. Let's say each one is making 100,000 pounds of steam, each one of the new units making 100,000, he's making 20,000. It's holding my boilers at the 100,000, but when his load increases, I have some room, so I'm gonna come up to my maximum fire. He's probably gonna be, his unit's gonna come up some, but until my units run out of, basically when they're temperature limited, then his unit will make up that difference.
Okay, so I don't think, I'll take back why I say we need to put a condition. I think you're already addressing that in the feed loop.
Yeah, so even the condition that's on the permit, the original permit, has a stated temperature of the catalyst that's on there. So we have to, as a commissioning manager, I have to make sure that those conditions are never not met. We have to confide by those conditions. So we have to make sure that catalyst never exceeds the temperature that's stated in the documents.
Okay, I think I understand now. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I had a question. And I may have missed some of this because there's a lot of technical stuff, so I may have got lost in it at some point. So just let me know if I'm missing something. But in the petition, it was noted that the 330,000 pounds per hour of steam was necessary, and that the turbines could only produce 250,000. So I'm just wondering if in the condition 6 that's proposed with regard to limiting the facility steam production to a maximum of 330,000 pounds, can we also similarly limit the boiler to no more than 80,000, which makes up that difference? Or did we determine that the 250,000 goes up and down depending upon the usage of the turbines?
So you've evaluated that correctly. It would go up and down based on the turbine's availability and its operating cycle. So it wouldn't always be at 80. It could be higher than that if the turbine generator is going lower for whatever reason during testing or some other operational condition.
Is there any acceptable or conservative limitation, just to make sure that the boiler isn't doing the majority of the?
You know, the way I feel there is that, you know, we have not run the Sharon steam boiler with the two turbines for very long, so we really don't know exactly the limitations of the process as yet, because we weren't designed to run like this, and we're gonna kind of have to learn as we go. So I feel that the current item 6 is something we can make sure we maintain that.
Okay. So at this point, you just don't know what the minimum amount of steam you would need from the boiler would be?
Yeah, I could say, hey, this is gonna be the number until we run it for a little while, so we'll figure out kind of where we go with this down the road.
And that's something we'll know better, obviously, in January.
That's correct.
And we'll have all the monitoring data that would be required.
Right,
Okay.
exactly.
And if I might add, our expectation in response to the Rule 504, which we presented in January, would look at that very thing to make sure that if there is, that we do not exceed the offsets cap. So there may need to be a condition on Sharon at that time, potentially, to avoid the offsets question that came up earlier.
Okay. And I'm very glad Mr. Balagopalan brought that up, so we can all have that in the back of our minds moving forward. Any other questions? Oh, Ms. Barrera, did you have a follow-up?
Yeah, I did. Is it possible, well, first of all, I guess you've been operating under a variance for approximately a week. Can you tell us what the hours of operation or the operation of the boiler has been during that time?
Yeah, we had a mechanical issue in the plant, so we actually didn't fire up the Sharon steam boiler till Sunday at 4 p.m. approximately. And so we've been running like that for the past 2 days now with the boiler up and running.
Okay. And how have actual sort of excess emissions during that time compared with the projected sort of max running of the boiler for the week?
You know, from the data that's been available so far, the Sharon steam boiler hasn't ran, I think, more than 50% load yet, but we haven't, you know, went through our full grade structure yet either, so.
Can you, is there a way to quantify sort of, because I think you had to do a report to the inspector this last week on excess emissions. Have you done that report?
We the report we supplied was the time that the boilers were running, and also we've been recording the steam throughputs every hour to make sure we're staying below 330,000 pounds.
Okay. So is there a way to quantify, I guess, as a percentage, sort of the actual excess emissions from this last week versus the projected? I don't know if you can do that.
Excess emissions for the week of the reporting week that we decided to use was the calendar week. So it'll be from Saturday to Saturday going forward on Tuesday reporting for the calendar week. During the previous report, which I do have a copy of and could admit as an exhibit, the report to the district inspector, there was no excess emission for that period.
Okay, thank you.
The boiler was run, though, correct?
No, because of the mechanical issues mentioned by Mr. Delaney, it was not run until Sunday, which is
That was outside that
which
first
is
week.
this current week that we're in, correct?
Now I understand. Thank you. Senator?
the opening statement on this part of the request for the variance was that the excessive emission is not greater than the reduction. Which one of you guys said that?
That was me, thank you.
Right. Am I to understand that then, that the old system coupled with the new system, even though it has not yet been commissioned, operating simultaneously, you get a reduction in emission? Is that correct?
Not with the old turbine. The old turbine was a high emitter, so it must remain off to see any emission reduction.
So you get an emission reduction just using the new system,
Correct.
and it's not, but you may not be getting the amount of 330,000 pounds per hour that you want. 330,000 pounds per hour.
We're unable to produce that with the new equipment.
Then therefore the system is not efficient, is that correct?
It's not operating as designed.
Then how do you get what you need in order to operate?
That is the problem that was trying to find a solution for.
So you're not operating it at all, or are you?
We're not operating the old unit at all. It's a high emitter, and we would,
Just operating the new system, which is not producing what you want?
right, and that hence the request for the boiler to operate as a makeup steam generator.
Fine. And you also mentioned that you sell some power to Edison from time to time?
Yes,
Surplus on the grid?
And I'd like to clarify that as well, because it was, as testimony by Mr. Martin, the way in which the configuration is, the more the turbine is used, the gas turbine generator for electricity, the more heat is available for the most efficient part of the process. So it's a aspect of running the most efficient equipment is to also generate the highest amount of electricity, correct?
Now, are you working with Edison International? Because we have no jurisdiction over Edison International regarding regulation. Which one are you working with? There's no Edison in the state of California.
Yeah, I mean, we're working with the Southern California Edison Company, which I believe is international, yes.
That's Edison International.
Yes.
Right, which means that what they charge you when you buy it from them compared to what they give you for what you sell to them, leaves us no control over regulating that system. There's no control. So therefore, in order to get a parity or fairness, somewhere along the line, there have to be some agency that has regulation control of Edison International as they relate to your operation.
I'm trying to understand the
understand?
relevance of this line.
Yeah, the relevance is that it was explained that when they sell power to Edison, it's not compensated equally when they buy power from Edison. It's 3 times the difference,
Right.
which therefore means that the Edison company they're selling to and buying from is Edison International, and the Public Utilities Commission have no control over that. That's why I said.
I understand, but we're not setting anything that would have control over that. I'm just trying to understand why
I
this is
understand.
relevant.
What I'm saying is that maybe from this hearing and from hearings in the future, there has to be something done in order to guarantee parity.
Well,
May I
that,
clarify?
You may clarify, however, that
You
this
understand?
is not really relevant, but I'm trying to understand how this is relevant.
They pay their service to Southern California Edison Company. Southern California Edison Company is under the umbrella of the international, EIX International. However, they're not paying to EIX. And the regulatory agency over Southern California Edison Company, which is one of the 3 investor-owned utilities, PG&E, SCE, San Diego Gas and Electric, is the Public Utilities Commission. So
Okay, but-
that's where that,
I'm still trying to understand how that's relevant. Where the request, the point is not whether or not we have to give a variance that gives any kind of parity or whatever between rates of selling and buying. We just need to understand what the impact is if they have to purchase electricity versus selling it, just so that we understand the impact to the company of allowing them to run the boiler with the 2 turbines or not doing that, for the purposes of making the findings. So I still, but if there's more questions.
In Exhibit 1, they talked about the cost that's reflected in this operation. So therefore, cost is significant. That's why they raised the point. That's why I raised the point.
Right, I think you're talking about page 24, but that is the cost of if they have to purchase, is that what you're talking about? If they were to only run one of their new turbines and the boiler, and that is allowable under their permit. So what would be the cost to them of purchasing the electricity? So for that, it's relevant, but otherwise,
Relevant.
okay, but I'm trying to understand why. I'll step back. Any other questions? Any other questions? Okay. Did I have another question? Mr. Balagopalan, you have a question?
Mr. Wolf, on your last slide on Exhibit 1, just, slide 28, yeah.
Yes.
So it appears that you've got a change of condition on a permit to have more natural gas usage during the commissioning period, is that?
Yes, that was a request made on Friday of last week.
And has it been approved? or-
I'm sorry, it was approved
It was
Friday of last
approved on
week.
Friday, okay. And so when we're referring to an application, I guess, and I know we don't, nothing has changed as far as, so the condition is added to the facility permit, basically?
It's part of the condition of the facility permit, the section H, which is the permit to construct. And we don't really believe that this is actually part of this variance hearing. It was added as relevant because in the event that they have to exceed their backed limit, because they're recommissioning, if you will, the final solution, we would just request that the district allow the gas that's remaining that's allowable for commissioning activities to be used at that future time.
And we can address that at the regular variance hearing if that becomes relevant
Okay, yeah.
to what they're asking for.
Okay, I was trying to understand. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, did you have another question? I had a question.
And the variance conditions, section 4, included in section 4 is that third dot down there. That's reflected in HRSG in terms of its operation, is that correct?
That is correct.
And since you have a timeline on that, what's your estimate?
So the the best figure or way to look that up is if you go to slide 21 of Exhibit 1. We're going to be entering into a phase starting hopefully tomorrow of a design review. What's been happening so far is almost triage, if you will, trying to put together the pieces of what the design is and what was actually constructed. But starting with the report from the firm that's looking at the HRSG, that will take place between now and the end of the year. Does that answer your, so the third bullet is really about the problem being identified in the next 6 weeks.
Yeah, they're gonna come up with 1120 to present their findings and potential solution,
Correct,
which has not yet been done, is that correct?
correct.
Okay, so once you do that, then you go to design review and engineering determination.
Correct.
And then you have to go with possible equipment fabrication. So you don't know what equipment they're gonna have to need and how much time it's gonna take to fabricate the equipment, so you can't, everything is open-ended.
That's correct.
It's open-ended, but remember, we're setting the regular variance hearing for January 14th. So we would address those issues at that time.
That'd be good.
I had a question, just want to make sure that I understand. if you did not get an interim variance today, is there any legal impediment to you continuing to run the old turbine?
They would not be able to run the new equipment.
But otherwise, the permit wasn't,
It's-
was not pulled. I mean, there's still a valid permit, and you could legally, under all rules and regulations, go back and operate the old turbine.
Correct.
Okay, I just want to understand that. Any other questions? Okay. Oh, Mr. Balagapone.
I'm just, for the variance condition, I'm just wanted to make sure we're referring to the right section H, because you didn't provide the latest issued one. So whether we should reference the date, do you have a date? Because the one we have here, section H, is dated October 18th.
That is the most recent.
That's the most
issuance.
recent.
Yes.
And you said something was issued last Friday, or with the new condition for the
No, that was an approved gas. So actually, you can look at if you look at Exhibit 2, if we look at, one moment. Okay, I could admit that into evidence now, if you like. There's another
I'm sorry,
page.
Exhibit 2?
There's another,
I'm sorry, are you referring to Exhibit 2?
I was, but then I realized that Exhibit 2 did not contain the condition C 1.7,
Okay.
which is the gas rate that is being questioned.
But I think since we don't have to address that, we don't need it, I guess, right, at this point?
Okay,
No.
Okay. I know, I'm just trying to make sure, we have the right version.
so what was approved, so I could just read it for the record. It says, for the purpose of this condition, fuel usage shall be defined as the total natural gas usage during the commissioning period, unless additional fuel usage is approved by the district for commissioning purposes. The district approved additional gas use for commissioning purposes on Friday of last week.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you. Ms. Pereira, did you wish to introduce any witnesses?
No, I don't.
Okay. So at this time, we'll take any closing statements, beginning Mr. Wolf, if you'd like to make any closing statements on the sixth finding.
So thank you again for hearing us today. As evidenced before you, the facility was unaware or had no really way of understanding that a problem could have materialized in the way that it did prior to starting the full firing of the duct burners. When that occurred and they did identify the issue with the steam, they immediately tried to address that. We went over that during the good cause finding. One thing that is specific about this project is the significant emission reductions associated with the project. And not just on the air pollutants that we're talking about, the particulate matter, VOCs, carbon monoxide, and NOx, but also, as mentioned by Mr. Delaney, the greenhouse gas reductions from reduced natural gas usage. Across the board, this is a very, very good project. It just has to get over this hurdle of design that has come to our awareness. So in that vein, we seek relief from the ability to operate the boiler to maintain facility operations while a solution is being found. And we believe that the excess emissions from the boiler will still be significantly below what would be emitted if the old unit was brought up and operated as currently permitted. And that concludes my testimony.
Thank you. Ms. Pereira, your closing.
Yes, based on the evidence presented, I believe that the board can make the findings to grant the interim variance. I'll just comment that it would be with respect to Rules 203B, 2004 F1, 3002C1. Those are the rules that require a facility to comply with the conditions of the permit. And here, the conditions at issue for today's variances are E193.3 and D29.1. No,
82.4.
82, it was the other one, I'm sorry, yeah, correct. And with that, the district does not oppose the issuance of the variance.
Thank you. Board members, anyone wish to begin discussion of the 6 findings? Mr. Balagopalan, if you'd like to begin, and we can all chime in.
Sure. Yeah, I think we can make the 6 findings. As Ms. Barrera indicated, they are in violation of the permit conditions, E193.3 and D82.4, and the relevant section that was cited, 203B, 2004 F1, and 3002 C1. And so that we can make that first finding. And then I think the second finding is it was beyond their reasonable control. They didn't expect this to happen while they discovered while commissioning. And as we heard in the earlier hearing, for good cause, that they acted diligently in trying to come into getting a variance in process here. So, and requiring compliance would actually be unreasonable taking property. And it turned out, as a matter of fact, that this new unit, even with the old with the boiler running, it's still a lot cleaner than the old unit with running. So it is a cleaner operation. So, and the permit does not allow, once they have everything working, the additional the standby boiler to operate unless one of the unit is down. So, so the emissions should, with the new system in place and once all worked out, should be much lower than what was existing before with the old unit. So it would be without a corresponding benefit in reducing air contaminants. They have given consideration to curtailing operation, and I think we heard there's some contractual obligation, though it's a minor amount, 20,000 pounds, but they do need the 310 pounds per hour of steam to have their production going. So while they did not actually reduce production rate, I think they're keeping it the same as the design rate, but I think they have given that's the only, I don't see a condition per se, unless somebody can help me here.
No,
that,
I don't know that you need to have a condition. I would say this with regard to curtailment, and I think it's very well laid out, I think, on page 24 of Exhibit 1, and that is, the last question that I asked was, could they just curtail operations by, in essence, not using these turbines, and instead, could they use the old turbine and the boiler and just obviate the need for a variance? And the answer is yes. However, the NOx hit would be so significant that I don't think it's an option. It's not an option to anyone, including to this board. So I think that's sufficient for that.
Yes, I agree. Yeah. So then during the period, the variance in effect, the petition will reduce excess emission, and I think we've seen that there's a SEM on the existing boiler, so they'll record that and give actual NOx emission, and then they'll be monitoring the fuel usage to get the emissions from the boiler for the other pollutants, and they also have the SEMs for the new gas turbines. So that's, I think. So I think that, hopefully I've addressed all the 6 findings that,
I agree, and I would just add that there are a lot, we all did, I think, consider what kind of, we're just talking about an interim variance. We're only talking about until this could be heard in January for a regular variance. Not that that's not a significant amount of time, but we were looking at, could we curtail the use or reduce the use of the boiler? But I do think that there are significant incentives in place to get this to sort of get these up and running and enough steam being made by the 2 turbines. There was discussion of they want to be be more efficient and have those gas savings. They'll have to be purchasing reclaim RTCs. They'll have to also be the equivalent, which are more expensive, of the greenhouse gas credits, the consultants that they're paying. There's a lot of, and plus they have $50 million invested. So I think they have every incentive of trying to bring these up online and making enough steam so they don't have to run the boiler. A lot of incentive to do that. So I think that will be reducing overall the use of the boiler and hopefully getting us to the end line quicker. And it's very hard for them to have a percentage because they don't have enough information, so they don't know how much they could reduce it. But we do see, if they were to also go along the lines of their current permit and not get an interim variance today, they could just run one turbine at a time and the boiler, but that would be a hit of approximately, say, just over $20,000 a day of purchasing electricity from the grid. Or they could curtail their steam production, but that also is a very significant cost per day of about $100,000 a day. So with all of that, and considering that the excess emissions are anticipated to be, even very conservatively, running 24 hours a day, which they don't anticipate that, to be 74.53 pounds per day of NOx, and then what we see as to the other pollutants. But that also keeping in mind that just not running the turbine, which they were currently doing, and they could be doing by law, they could, their permit's still good, there's no rule or regulation that prohibits it. There is a very significant reduction, and when we look on page 12 of Exhibit 1, we're much closer, the testimony was, to the post-modification potential in terms of NOx, VOC, and PM. So overall, it's relatively not that much in terms of excess emissions, but a big hit to the company. So, is there any other thoughts, though, on the findings by anyone? Ms. Verdugo-Peralta.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I also agree with what has been stated. In addition, I want to compliment you on your efforts to keep in mind the fact that you could have polluted and you chose not to. And the fact that combined heat and power is the most efficient way to go. And I think you're going to actually be a model for the rest of not only your industry, but several industries that use this type of power generation. So, and for that reason, I also agree with the findings have been met. Thank you.
Any other thoughts? Mr. Balagopalan, did you want to make a
Sure, I'll
motion?
take
Okay,
seven, yeah.
and then,
Okay, in the matter of New-Indy, New-Indy, Ontario LLC, case number 6162-1, I move that we grant an interim variance commencing today and continuing through the regular variance on
we would
schedule.
say 90 days from when the ex parte was granted, which was November 13th, 2019, or until this matter could be heard for a regular variance, which is currently scheduled for January 14th, 2020, whichever comes first.
Okay, thank you. And from the following rules and subsection, that's Rule 203B, 2004 F1, 3002 C1, from permit condition E 193.3 and D 82.4 for the listed in the facility permit that was issued on October 18, 2018 in Section H for the boiler device ID D41, gas turbine number 1, device ID 67, and gas turbine number 2, device ID 75. And in addition, I think we would, let me see, the conditions of the variance shall be as set forth in Exhibit A with the change that Ms. Pruzak had identified and let me see if I got the right, if I'm addressing what you indicated. Condition number 3, that they shall monitor and record the fuel usage of boiler D41. And I'm going to add this, and estimate excess emissions based on fuel usage, except for NOx, which will be based on the SEMS data.
Second.
Wait, first, complete your motion, excess emissions, what are they?
Yeah, excess emission is provided in, as provided in the petition, and I'll read the excess emission. And this worst-case excess emission based on the boiler operating at maximum capacity 24 hours a day. So that for NOx, it's estimated to be 74.53 pounds a day. For SOx, it's 3.5 pounds per day. BOC is 32.13 pounds per day. CO is 1,814 and 74.74 pounds per day, and PM is 44.39 pounds per day. And as we already indicated before, this excess emission because the boiler had to operate, but there's a significant reduction with operating the combined heat and power of the boiler to the tune of 1,000 pounds of NOx a day.
And one other thing, you need to fill in the open line on condition 8, and usually we do it 15 days from today, and that allows for adjustment later on.
December 4th, okay. And so condition 8 shall pay all applicable fees to the clerk of board by December 4th, or this variance shall be void pursuant to Rule 303K.
And that completes your motion?
And that completes my motion.
And Ms. Verdugo Peralta, you second
I
that motion?
second the motion.
Okay, is there discussion on that motion?
On the motion question. In any way does these conditions being submitted today conflict with the conditions set forth in ex parte? It seem to be the same, or is there any conflict? Any conflict in the conditions set forth in the ex parte?
The ex parte ends today, so there's no conflict because Exhibit A will now take over.
Will supersede, yeah, but I'm just saying, these conditions that set forth in ex parte, some of them you read off, so I just want to know if there's any conflict, even though it expires today.
No conflict.
Same as, thank you.
In fact, I think we added an additional condition that was not in the ex parte, which was the, I think, D 82.3, I believe, 82.4. So that was not there in the ex parte.
No, he's, right, you're asking the variance conditions, the conditions of the variance, not the conditions of which they're getting a variance from in their permit, but the variance condition, right? That was the question?
Right.
Yeah.
It seemed to be this,
And I believe they're the same with just additions.
Yeah, they're basically the same. I think we tightened up some of the language and maybe added a little bit more, detail to what was required for the reporting. But that's it.
Thank you, Ms. Barrera. And that answers your question, correct?
good job,
Any other
good job on
discussion?
the part of the jury.
Oh, thanks. Any other discussion on the motion? Okay. Senator, how do you vote?
Aye.
Dr. Bernstein, how do you vote? Aye. I vote yes. Ms. Verdugo Peralta, you vote.
Aye.
Mr. Balagopalan votes.
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0. Okay, thank you, and we look forward to seeing you, well, I don't know if you look forward to seeing us, but we look forward to seeing you again in January, and we'll see where we are at that time.
Thank you.
Yes.
Yes, good luck. Any other business board members? Okay, we are adjourned. Thank you.